Hello, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Albright, and this is Beyond Compliance. This is the show that goes deep into the insights and impacts surrounding the process manufacturing industry. So if you're just joining Beyond Compliance for the first time, we're very glad you're here because this series is designed to give you some freshly picked perspectives and strategies straight from industry experts, which then you can take to grow and improve your business outcomes. So, in case you missed it, this series is hosted by SafetyChain. We're the #1 plant management platform that enable process manufacturers to improve yield, maximize productivity, and ensure compliance. Can I get a yes? Yes.
Amen.
All right, let's move on. Hey, there we go. Now, before we get rolling into the deep details of tiered management, just know that everybody's mics are muted. We are leaving room at the end for Q&A, so please do submit your comments and questions using the GoToWebinar panel at any time during the session. And yes, this session is being recorded, and yes, we will be sending it along with the slides later today, so be sure to look out for that. All right, let's meet our speakers. We're really excited to have with us David Hicks and Tim Nickerson from one of our fantastic partners, TBM Consulting. Some of you actually may remember Dave speaking on driving improvements to move your OEE needle past 85% in an earlier Beyond Compliance session. And in case you missed that, it was amazing. And I will send that to you guys after this session as well, along with the recording of today's session. So be sure to check that out. All right, so before we launch into our topic, Dave, Tim, welcome. How about you give us a little background on your experience in TBM?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. This is Dave. Happy to be back and happy to be talking about one of my favorite topics today, which is a daily management system, bringing structure and rigor to the daily process that we have in manufacturing. I've been with TBM nearly 18 years now. Prior to that, I spent 20 years in industry. I grew up in the automotive industry, but also had experience in aerospace and medical device and a couple other areas. So I was fortunate to work for a very large company that had operations in all those different areas. And as it turned out, it was a great place to train to be a consultant. And so here I am today. Tim, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you, David. Thank you, Jim.
Oh, Tim, we might have a little bit of an echo. You might need to.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Is that any better? No, it's not.
Yeah, if you mute your speaker, maybe that might help. All right. Tim's great, ladies and gentlemen. He's also got a great singing voice, so maybe he'll don a nice tune for us later.
I'll try to do this.
Okay.
That's even.
Yeah, that sounds good, Tim. All right, take it away.
All righty. I've been with TBM a little over 11 years. And similar to Dave, I've worked in automotive industry, primarily tier 1 manufacturing supplier of airbag and airbag systems. And I've had the privilege of applying these principles we'll be going over today, and have applied them both in process, discrete industries, as well as transactional environments. Again, I look forward to sharing the management system with you today, and spending a little time maybe answering a few questions at the conclusion. Thank you.
Right, and I think we have Angela from TBM who's going to introduce us a little bit more about what TBM has been up to and how they're changing the business outcomes for so many manufacturers today. Angela, are you on with us?
Yes, thanks, Jim. So TBM is a global operations and supply chain consultancy. We've been around about 30 years. If you read Lean Thinking way back when, you'll read a lot of stories about companies where we've worked. What's interesting about that is we introduced Lean methodologies to the U.S. market in the early 90s, and that's where we got our start. Our consultants come with lots of hands-on experience. You'll see that a lot in what Tim and Dave have to offer to you today with their insights. We're very results focused, and we're very committed to tying improvement priorities to your financial gains. And that's very much what the management system is going to talk to you about today, and how we create a fundamental foundational management system and the discipline that's required to execute effectively and sustain. So you'll learn about that as they talk today. And this is just some of the background of who we are, the industries we serve. We're primarily focused in manufacturing, many sectors within the manufacturing space, and we are generally recognized for depth of consulting capabilities and our ability to drive and make an impact in your business.
I love that. Speed wins every time. It's great. Okay, guys, I think we're ready
Thanks.
to talk about today's topic. And Dave, I think you're going to lead us in.
Yeah, I will. So today we're gonna talk about our management system overview, what it is, why it's important, those types of things. Tim's going to spend a lot of time on the tiered system, which provides the framework for this. One of the things, I don't know if everybody's aware or not, but today's webinar is one in a series of three. So today, the part of the management system we're going to talk about, again, is a tiered system overview. And then in future webinars, we're going to be talking about things like leader standard work, layered audit, abnormality management, and problem solving. So all the pieces will come together after all three. Obviously not as much in detail as we get when we do these things in person, but still should give you a very good overview. Okay.
All right. I think we should start off with a poll question. Get everybody's brains kicking into gear for the topic. Are we ready to launch the poll?
Let's
Yes.
do it.
All right, here we go. Everybody should be seeing that poll question. So which statement best describes your organization? We have a few options here. Really interesting questions here. I think we're going to learn a lot from this. So yes, everybody take a moment and let's get your answers in the next few seconds here. Wow, we're seeing some interesting results. I've got lots of firefighting. All right, just 2 more seconds and we'll close the poll. And let's close that poll and show those results for everybody. Here we go. Look at that, huh?
Yeah, wow. So definitely those of you that are in that firefighting mode, you came to the right webinar to start. And hopefully you'll be able to stay with us for the three-part series. And I think it'll help quite a bit.
Definitely. All right, let's get into it, guys. Here we go.
So yeah, so this first slide talks about the three critical components of our management system. And as you can see, it's metrics, framework, and capability. And I will tell you, of course, anytime we talk about something that has three, we're going to trot out the three-legged stool analogy and point out that 2 out of 3 doesn't cut it, right? So we need all three of these things. So when we talk metrics, and we're not going to spend a lot of time today talking about metrics, or some people call them KPIs, key performance indicators. I'm going to assume that you all have metrics that you use in your business. The key is we want to make sure that we have the right metrics, the metrics that will help us drive improvement. And we want those metrics to kind of start at the bottom and flow up. So we start with hour by hour charting at the production cell or line, whatever you may have, which feeds into our SQDC, safety, quality, delivery, cost, those trackers. And then finally up to our monthly performance, right? So having the right metrics, having the right KPIs, very, very important. The second element down at the bottom, the framework, is really important as well. And again, that's going to be our focus today. So that framework provides a structure that allows us to visualize and act on the metrics, right? So we've got our key metrics. We now need a system that allows us to review those, understand how they're trending, and then act to drive improvement. And that's what this framework we'll talk about today gives us. And the third leg of our three-legged stool is capability. So, in other words, people have to have the capability to impact those metrics, right? So we need to learn things like abnormality management and problem solving in the here and now. You know, we're big believers that the best time to solve a problem is when it happens. And so we want to solve problems in the here and now. So what kind of tools can I leave with a supervisor, with a team leader to help them solve problems as they occur? Other types of capability that we need to have are things like leader standard work and layered audits. So how do we use those to drive improvement in the business? Again, those topics we'll cover in webinar 2 and webinar 3. And I think we have those dates at the end of this presentation today. Okay. So the slide we have here talks about two things. If you look on the left, you've got strategic planning. If you look on the right, you've got tactical execution, right? One thing that we know is that really successful companies do two things and do them very, very well. They execute on their strategic plan and they execute on their tactical plan. So let's take a minute, we'll talk about the difference, right? So strategic plan is a plan that's top-down driven. That's where our CEO and his or her direct reports work together to develop our 3 to 5 year vision, if you will, for the firm. And then that vision cascades down the organization to the point of impact. All right. The tactical plan, on the other hand, that's where we start talking about things like, you know, we want to make the month, we want to hit our AOP, annual operating plan, our financial plan, whatever you call it. And that's really bottom up driven. So you can see here, we've got our tier meetings. So there's actually one that comes before even the tier 1 meeting, and that's the hour by hour chart. So if you think about it, that hour by hour chart tells our production folks, here's what we expect out of you during the course of the day. And if they're not able to hit that target, it gives them a vehicle to communicate back to us, here's what kept me from doing that, right? And now it becomes incumbent on us to correct that situation. And that's where the whole abnormality and problem solving comes in. So the tactical execution goes from hour by hour to tier 1, tier 1A, tier 2, 3, 4. And the tier 4 and the level 3 review on the left-hand side, that's where things start to overlap between our tactical execution and our strategic execution. So those things work together to drive the business. We've got that strategic, which we often talk about as working on the business. And we've got the tactical, which we talk about as working in the business. Those two things together, if we execute those with perfection, we're going to be a very high performing business. Next slide, please. So now, last slide, I'm going to talk about at a very high level about implementing the management system, right? And you'll see again, three things: training, implementation, audit, coach, and mentor. And I'll talk about each of those and some of the things that I think are really important. So if you look under training, you're going to see the word boot camp. That's a word we chose very specifically because what we do is when we do a management system implementation, our training is a 2-day workshop which we call the boot camp. And the reason we call it a boot camp is we just throw tons of information at people in those 2 days. So if you think about it, we talk about the tier system, abnormality management, problem solving, leader standard work, layered audits, Gemba and Kata. We introduce A3s, and for each of those topics, we have exercises. So there's a lot that goes on, but the idea is you want to level set everybody, get everybody so that they understand, okay, here's the tier system, here's that framework, and then here are some of these capabilities that I have to learn, right? The next step says implement. And the implement is really the part of it that is the physical part of the framework. So it's answering questions like, where am I going to have my tier 1 meeting? Where am I going to have my tier 2 meeting? Where am I going to put my safety, quality, delivery, cost boards and the KPIs associated with that so that people can see it, talk about it, act on it, right? So if we've got all the things that we need, whiteboards and flip charts and everything else, probably a good hard week is what it takes to do that. I call that standing up the system, right? So that's the implementation part. We're not working yet, but we've got the structure of the framework in place. The final piece, and unfortunately, this is the piece that most organizations, I would say they don't even, I wouldn't even call it skip it, because they don't even think about it. They think, okay, I've done the training, I've set up the system, now let's go do it. And then when it fails, they're confused as to why. And I'll tell you the why is because we're dealing with grown-ups, and grown-ups learn much better when we show them things, right? So that's what the coaching and mentoring is. We need to spend time on the shop floor with our supervisors, with our team leaders, modeling for them things like probably, the first couple of weeks of doing this, we need to model how to lead a tier meeting. We need to model how to attend a tier meeting, right? Okay, maybe I'm not going to lead it, but I'm in it. So what do I need to be prepared to do or to discuss, right? And then after a while, we need to model for them abnormality management, leader standard work, all those other key elements. So as you can tell, this is not a 2-day workshop, stand up the system, go get them. It's a 2-day workshop, stand up your system, and then spend a lot of time. And I would tell you, my experience has been start with 6 weeks and think to yourself, okay, if my organization has some of these elements in place already, maybe I take a couple weeks away. If my organization doesn't, we're starting from scratch, maybe I need to add a couple weeks to that 6 weeks. And again, you have to think through, wow, what if we're a 24-hour, 7-day operation? Guess what? We need to find coverage so that everybody's getting exposed to this valuable one-on-one coaching and mentoring, right? And that's the piece that will drive your success. Okay, so as you start thinking about doing this, everybody is pretty good at doing the training. Everybody's good at standing up the system. But when it comes to the coaching and mentoring, that's a lot of times where we fall short. And, it could just be, look, we don't have the resources to do that. And that's where sometimes working with an outside agency becomes very helpful. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Tim and let Tim start to talk about the tier system.
Great, thank you, Dave. So I want to talk a little bit about what the tier system is, and what I'm going to do is kind of boil down this slide and the blocks. So the tier communication, it's a methodology which really links the point of impact, value-added work, and its performance throughout an organization and throughout an organization's chain of command. And that communication cadence, it can literally be communicated in increments as small as 60 minutes or an hour. The way that the process works is we track specific KPIs, we measure those KPIs against a target, and then when KPIs do not achieve target, we then move into problem-solving mode, utilizing various problem-solving methodologies. And then lastly, we drive the closure of root cause through problem solving, through accountability. And we have a very formal methodology around accountability. But going back to the KPIs, really the KPIs are based on, number one, employee safety, and those critical few elements that are defined by our customers. In a Six Sigma methodology, they're referred to as CTQs, critical to quality, which are defined by the customer. Once we identify what those KPIs are, we then measure those and establish targets, and then a monitoring system, which is normally very visual, which can then monitor and track process capability, performance, again, actual versus target. And then when needed, where actual is less than target over a trend of time, then we move into problem-solving mode with the expectation that we will be quickly able to move into root cause analysis, either by a very simple, just do it kind of methodology, or we can move through 5S, fishbone diagramming, and then if needed, escalate to something that's a little more suited for complex problem solving, which is the A3 methodology. And lastly, accountability. Accountability is where we fully utilize the chain of command, its experience, its expertise, its resources, really to bring to bear the root cause and countermeasures in a very timely and impactful manner. So if we go to the next slide, this next slide, and I'm moving from top to, from bottom up. This slide really, what it does is it introduces the tier communication methodology, where an organization can link at the highest level, tier 4, a strategic or annual operating plan, vision, and targets to a daily or hourly activities that drive this operational performance. And as Dave said, operational performance can be tied obviously to safety, quality, delivery, and cost. So that takes us down to our hour by hour. And in many cases, we believe the hour by hour is the heartbeat of productivity. And from that heartbeat, we can determine where we're going to perform relative to on-time delivery expectations. It can give us an indicator of operational cost, meaning how many hours per unit have gone into making a particular product, or how many dollars per labor hour are being consumed to produce. And then we also get a pretty good picture around capacity utilization. And again, those measures can be evaluated or gleaned from this hour by hour measurement. As we move up, the communication between 1A, 1A, and Tier 2, those are the daily communication system within shift, across shift, and for the business unit or the plant. So that happens on a daily cadence, again, measuring performance to target against safety, quality, delivery, and cost elements. The Tier 3 communication is that weekly problem-solving cadence around problems that really need more of a cross-functional data-driven sort of approach to achieve a root cause solution. And then the last piece of the communication is the highest level, which has direct linkage to an annual operating plan or a strategy deployment initiative for a yearly target. So in this case, we can build those high-level expectations, which could be market growth and market penetration, and then we can cascade down through the various tactical levels of performance to determine, are we opening up capability and performing to target in order to achieve our strategic plans. So that's kind of at a glance the communication methodology, the linkage between the hourly, daily, weekly, and monthly cadence of communication. So if we go to the next slide, this next slide basically provides a snapshot of the tier meeting concepts. And what we mean by the snapshot is, what's the frequency, who attends, what are the key inputs that attendees need to be prepared to deliver, and then what are those key outputs that the attendees who are receiving the information, what do they need to be equipped to take away in order to execute work within their area. So to go into a little more detail on this slide, a traditional business system, it's made up roughly of 4 tiers with 5 meetings. And the tiers, as I mentioned earlier, are held in different frequencies and levels of the organization. However, within any chain of command, whether I'm a shop floor production associate or I'm the plant manager, within a day, each of us could be communicating with one another based on those 4 critical business elements of safety, quality, delivery, and cost. Tier 1 meeting is normally focused on a shift handoff. It could happen 2 to 3 times a day based on the number of shifts the operation is running, and it's basically held between the interfacing shift supervision and with focus around changeover or immediate issues affecting downtime or quality. The Tier 1A meeting is a shift startup with focus on manpower resources or attendance. It also has a focus around production needs or the production schedule. It also will focus on any specific unique quality attributes for production that's going to be scheduled in the near future or within shift. And then every Tier 1 meeting starts with a safety briefing. Now we're moving up. As we talked about on the previous slide, our Tier 2, this is traditionally facilitated by the plant manager. It's a consolidation, if you would, of the various departments or Tier 1 performance measurements, and this is held on a daily basis. What's important here is this is the time where escalation takes place, where the shifts have deemed that they will need help in order to resolve certain issues. And this is the place, the Tier 2 meeting, where escalation takes place and additional resources and expertise are applied. Tier 3, held weekly. It's traditionally assigned to a deep dive of problem solving for more chronic type of issues that are challenging the operation to get to root cause. And then lastly, the Tier 4 could be held twice a month, but at least monthly, and it is really focused on tracking performance to strategic plan initiatives and or the annual operating plan performance commitments. So this is a kind of a snapshot, as I mentioned earlier, around the format, the look and feel of the Tier meeting methodology. If you go to the next slide, this next slide in the tier room layout, we refer to this as the kind of the physical location or locations where communication takes place. This illustration really, it shows the various elements of communication. It starts with the communication methodology we just spoke of, tier 1, tier 2. It could also be the tier 3, which is the A3, but those various communication elements of communication, performance tracking, problem solving, Kaizen planning, and leader standard work. So what's important is you'll need to determine where to stand up these communication centers. This is an example of a standalone consolidated communication center, but what's recommended, as the note says, is that if tier 1 communication can be close to the value-added activity as possible, that's preferable because it sends a visual message. We communicate around what's important and what's in it for you, the particular associate. What I'd also like to mention around environmental considerations is that a tier communication room is around providing status, providing updates to plan. It's also meant to provide a visual, quick at a glance to understand performance. So we use quite a bit of color coding, red or green. We also use targets to illustrate if a red bar is below target, that means that we've missed the target. If it's green and above target, of course, we've achieved or exceeded the target. And those are very quick indicators that lead us into focus on problem solving rather than getting into the minutia of explaining the usual day-to-day without abnormality. It also creates an atmosphere for discussion, communication, and lastly, it's meant to be an area of trust. What we like to say is the process of continuous improvement is heavily focused on being tough on problems and rigorous on solving them, but being gentle and collaborative with the people. The last piece of this, I just want to circle back on this, is just to make sure that if needed, that we cater the tier 1s as close to the work area as possible, which then if there are multiple tier 1s, they will need to be consolidated prior to a tier 2 plant level meeting. All right, if we go to the next slide. This next slide, what I'd like to do is to conclude our discussion of the tier communication, just really stating that we believe it's imperative that an organization, you establish a formal escalation or a helpline, if you would, where unresolved problems can be surfaced and then addressed in a timely manner, utilizing the full scope and resources of an organization. In this graphic, what you'll be able to see is the tier-to-tier escalation flow, from tier 1 to tier 2, tier 2 to tier 3. And this flow, it really depicts a formal methodology where resources, experience, functional expertise, and resolution ownership, where they're added and applied throughout each phase of the problem solving and countermeasure process. So, it's very important that this piece is implemented. And I believe what Dave said is it's easy to talk about, communicate, and put boards up in an operation, but problem solving piece is very, very critical, and it's one of the probably the more challenging skills and techniques to learn, but it bears fruit as you are able to successfully move through the phases of escalation and ultimately problem solving effectively. So I want to thank you for your time and attention on this. I know it was a very rapid fire introduction to the tier communication. What I'm going to do is hand this back to Dave, and he's going to wrap up and talk about next steps.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. That's very good. So just some examples, right? These were some of our more recent examples that I was involved with. You see the productivity improvement, paper product manufacturer, 11%, 9 million to 10.2 million units. That's in a month. Hour by hour, and the tier system, there were no special fixes to equipment or anything like that. We worked with a printing operation that the whole tier system brought out to that department manager that, holy cow, my make readies are taking way too long. I got to reduce my make readies. And it's able to go from 4.6 to 3.2 hours. And last time I talked to him, he's headed down now to around 2.8. So
Hey, David, I think we may have lost your audio.
again, just implementation of the tiered system, right?
Hey, David, we lost your audio for the last, I would say 30 seconds. Do you mind repeating that?
Oh man, what
Yeah.
was that before the candy maker? Or?
That was just before the candy maker. You said you had just spoken to the gentleman who said he was probably around 2.8 hours. That was the printing operation.
2.8, right? Yeah, and okay. So sorry, with the candy maker, my favorite factory in the world. Um, again, they were able to eliminate weekend overtime just again by implementing hour by hour and the tier system. And so I expect much greater things out of them as they really get into the problem solving piece and start to drive that improvement. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So Tim and I were talking and said, well, what kind of things can you do? I mean, I know you can't, as a result of sitting through this webinar, you can't run right out and implement a daily management system, but some things that you can do, right? First of all, talk to your folks, talk to the production operators, and ask them when they leave for the day, do they know if they had a good day or a bad day? I know what it's like. I normally travel during the week, but I know when I come home at the end of the week, the first thing my wife says to me is, how was your week? And I know machine operators, assemblers, whatever, they're also going home and somebody's asking them, how was your day? And I always like to ask them, how do you answer that? Do you really know? Can you say, oh, I was supposed to make 1,000 units and I made 1,100. I killed it today. I had a great day. Or, conversely, I was supposed to make 1,000. We only made 900. We didn't have the right material, blah, blah, blah. So do they really know what's expected? And can they say, it was a good day or a bad day? Did we win the day? Second thing, I think you can go out and implement hour by hour tracking. If you're not doing that already, you should think about that. Think about how you want that to work. I want you to review your KPIs. Make sure the KPIs you have are being used to drive improvement in the business. All too often, unfortunately, when I walk into a client, I find out that what is being measured isn't necessarily what's going to drive improvement in the business, but it's something that's easy to measure, right? Then try to get a finger on the pulse of your organization relative to problem solving. How good are we at problem solving? Do we understand problem solving tools and techniques, or do we need a lot of work there? And then, given all the things Tim talked about, you can do an assessment of how you currently communicate and hold each other accountable. Are you having formal meetings throughout the day to communicate about performance and drive improvement? Is it all ad hoc? how does it work in your organization? So I think those are things you can take away and start to work on now.
All right, great. Dave, Tim, this was amazing. As you said, this is kind of just scratching the surface of what you guys really do when you walk onto a plant floor. I wanted to actually kind of get a better sense of what the biggest breakdown is, right? Because everything you just said makes a lot of sense. Um, but as you saw in our poll question, right, most of the folks here listening to you all are saying, hey, we're firefighting all the time. We can't slow down to speed up. So what kind of recommendations do you have to kind of get people's mind thinking around the importance of this methodology? And obviously, we saw in your examples, the outcomes are great. It does work. We know it does. But on the day-to-day, when the rubber meets the road, it's so hard to slow down to speed up.
Yep. I think, Jim, the rigor of the system, of not trying to shortcut the system or that sort of thing, but being very disciplined about it and following it. It's like anything. When you start doing something new, maybe for the first couple of weeks you're just going through the motions until you understand what's going on. But at some point, and I see this with every client, at some point the light bulbs go off and people go like, oh, I get it now. And so you've got to trust the process, rely on the rigor and the discipline. And then a lot of it has to do with, if you go back to that one slide that I showed, the three components of the system, or go to the one where we're talking about the three elements. Are we really doing the coaching and mentoring? And that's the big thing. I've not met anybody in any plant in my life that can't be coached, and for the most part isn't open to coaching. The problem is, do we have the resources and the time to do that? So I don't know, Tim, if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we see, and this is, I believe, kind of the dynamic of the work environment, is that the individual contributor, the hourly employee, they can readily see how it's going to better their environment. Hey, by addressing issues in a timely fashion, by removing roadblocks that get in my way of being able to be productive, communicating to me in a timely fashion. What happens, though, at the more senior levels is that if you do not have a senior leader who is dedicated to this process, it's going to be very, very difficult to push down through the organization. So success depends on a leader who's very committed to this and who is willing to coach and mentor this process with their time and effort.
Yeah, I remember you saying that leaders should model each one of the tiers, so they should attend the tier, or they should even to some degree maybe manage the tier itself. But what do you is it kind of similar? They just have too many other things that are taking priority from the leadership perspective? I guess what's the biggest hang up when you walk into that plant floor and you're talking to the folks that are on the floor, and then you're talking to the leadership team? What's the pushback? Because again, everybody wants the same thing. Everybody's looking for more efficiencies and looking for better communication and better visibility, but there's this hang up. So where are you seeing that on all the different tiers of the organization?
This is a great setup for the next session, which is around
I'm going to cue in some very suspenseful music when we do the replay here, but yes.
Yeah, we're going to have to work with you more often, Jim. So what happens is you're right. In order to get alignment on what is priority for the organization, what we do is a deep dive analysis of duties, responsibilities, and accountabilities at each level of the organization. And then based on identifying those KPIs or those key measurements, we then begin to focus our time and attention on those measurements. And so I guess we use the word superfluous if there's anything that I thought was priority and had been consuming amounts of time that are not focused on these KPIs, that piece of leader standard work and the exercises help redirect my priorities and help me then align and give me the feeling and the reality I'm working in tandem with my leadership and my subordinates. Dave, you want to add anything?
No, I think you handled that well, Tim.
Yeah, I'm just going to flash up the next slide here. Well, the other slide here, but this is what we're talking about. September 29th is going to dive a little bit deeper into what Tim was just saying there. So definitely look out for that invite when it comes through. I got a couple other questions here, guys. If you could hang out a little bit longer here. You had mentioned, I think this was Dave, you had mentioned you had kind of come into some situations where folks already have some of these elements in place, but maybe it's just not working out. Or you walk into a situation where, you know, you're looking around and say, hey, we're starting from scratch here. So can you give us a rough estimate around, you know, are most manufacturers actually doing some of these approaches well? Or are they mostly kind of scrambling around trying to make it work, but it's not really working out and we have to start from scratch? What's the average look like?
Um, without trying to be a smart aleck, like the average looks like the average. I mean, it's like, you know what? You go into some places, and I think there's um, some industry specific things. Like certain industries have more of this in place than others. If I'm working with somebody in aerospace, for example, there are certain elements that are in place. Maybe we don't have everything to complete the picture, but we've got some things. Automotive, certainly, same type of a situation. And then you go into other industries that maybe aren't in the supply chain of a major, let's say, medical device, automotive, or aerospace, that haven't been exposed to some of these. And what you're really dealing with is, you know, people are doing the best they know. And you know, it's the old statement of we don't know what we don't know, because I haven't been over in that industry. I haven't seen how things are done here. You know, so we're doing the best we can. And you know, so you're starting from a little bit of a disadvantage in that case.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously everybody's different. They're running different operations, so it's not cookie cutter, but
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's and
Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, and there tends to be a difference between um, larger public corporations and family-owned businesses.
Oh, sure. No, that
So
makes sense too.
yeah.
I got a question here around you made a point. I think Tim it was talking at this point, but when you were going through the tiers and you hit on tier 3 and you said, hey, the problem solving tier is one of the biggest challenges. Is that because there's maybe a lack of certain visibility, or you're not pulling the right data points, or what's usually the hang up there during the problem solving tier?
I believe some of it is attributable to one, the desire to put a quick Band-Aid in place. Once the Band-Aid is in place, we think we're done. But then when that product or process comes again, we have the same issue. So I think in some cases, there's a challenge in being diligent and completing problem solving through root cause because of what we perceive to be the lack of time. The other may be the lack of adherence to the escalation process, meaning, you know, I don't want to share my ineffectiveness with my leadership. They might think that I'm not competent, so therefore I'll avoid you know, escalating this issue. We'll get through this run, and then we'll move on to something else. So I think that you know, the Japanese culture is very, very different when it comes to surfacing problems. They view that really as a positive, surfacing as many opportunities for improvement as possible, which then drives the ability to use the tools and to, you know, work towards root cause.
Yep. And I like your point about saying, hey, these meetings really should be as close to the value add areas as possible. So you're getting right down in there and you're looking at all of the appropriate metrics and data points to make those decisions and solve those problems before they get worse. So that was a good point there. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up here, guys. Thank you so much. This was a really good first start to what we're going to learn in September and in November when we do part 2 and part 3. So again, thank you so much for spending the time with us here today. Everybody, their information is right here on my screen, so please do reach out if you have any further questions. Otherwise, we will be sending more information your way later today, including this recording. So thank you all who have joined us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Beyond Compliance. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.